All right, welcome everybody to the second half of Tuesday's MRASH conference. Really excited to have everyone with us. I see we are growing in participants, so I think everyone is using the correct link, which is fantastic. Like I said, in the previous room, we are not going to take a break. We're running a tad behind, so we're going to move right into what it was scheduled for our 1040 poster or presentations. And we're going to start with Rebecca Benaki. I hope I'm saying that right. And they will be presenting their presentation titled Nebraska Tractor and Equipment Safety Training, a 15-year follow-up survey of perspectives. So Rebecca, are you here? I see you're here.
I am here. I'm trying to share my screen here. Okay. Can you see that?
We can see that. It looks awesome. I will turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you. Again, and it's Benaki's fine. I would like to thank Ellen Dyson, first of all. She was my preceptor this summer during my applied practical experience. She let me follow her and Linda Emanuel around for a tractor safety week during the beginning of June. And what we did, we trained kids on tractor safety as well as other agricultural safety. And her and I had to discuss how to further this project. And we came up with a survey to give kids that had previous tractor safety trainings over the last 10 years and to see if we could improve it in some way. So these are my objectives here. I'm going to go a little bit over the history and the aims of the Nebraska Tractor Equipment Safety Training Program, go over a few of the program components, and then give a preliminary data review of the survey. And I would like to emphasize that this is preliminary data. We are still getting surveys coming in, and we have a whole nother set of surveys to send out. And this is just a map of the Central States Center Agricultural Safety and Health, their region they served, and the CSS cash offices at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, Nebraska. And here is a few statistics that I put up here just to give an example why we do tractor safety training. One of these you may have seen yesterday during the keynote address about child dies in agriculture and an agriculture-related incident about every 3 days. And also youth in agricultural fatalities in 2020, 47% involved transportation, including tractors, 20% involved contact with machinery, and 13% involved violent contact with animals and other humans. And then finally, youth under the age of 16 have 12 times the risk of ATV injuries compared to adults. And so that is the population we serve, kids in agriculture. About 893,000 youth lived on farms in 2014, and more than half of those worked on their farm. And also more than 265,600 non-resident youth were hired in agriculture in 2014. So that is the reason for that. The annual Nebraska Tractor and Equipment Safety Certification Training course. And this is for youths 14 and 15 years old who would like to work on farms or ranch that are not their own. And in order to do that, they must be certified through a hazardous occupations course to obtain a farm husbandry permit or a farm permit. And when completing this course, it allows them to operate a tractor over 20 horsepower and to connect or disconnect, implement, and implement or any of the parts to or from that tractor. So the Nebraska Extension Office has presented this tractor and equipment safety course for the last 40 years for kids that are 14 years of age or older. And since 2014, the CS Cash Office has been partnering with the Nebraska Extension Office. Susan Harris is in charge of administration, training venues, and registration. The CS Cash Office is in charge of course materials, written exams, and in-class training personnel. And finally, the driving exam is put on by both the Nebraska Extension Office personnel as well as the CS Cash Office personnel. And this right here is just an example of pre and post-COVID tractor safety trainings. Before COVID, the CS Cash folks and Extension Office folks had 12 different sites across the state of Nebraska, and each site had 2 days worth of training. After COVID in 2020, they still wanted to go out and train the tractor safety kids, and so they modified it. So the 1 day was an online training, and the second day would be the driving training, and they've reduced it down to 5 sites, so it'd be 1 week of tractor safety training. And the course curriculum for this tractor safety training is the National Safe Tractor and Machinery Operation program, and it is a project of the Hazardous Occupations Training in Agriculture. And essentially, it encompasses 2 days, whether it's online or in class. That first day is instruction, safety basics, agricultural hazards, the tractor itself, connecting and using implements and materials handling. And before they can go to the driver's portion of it, they do have to take a test and they have to pass that test. Now, if you see on the right, that is an example of the tractor's driving safety test that the extension officer usually sets up. And it consists of cones. They have to veer in and around the cones, back up, and then come back. And in addition to that, we want to do more than just tractor safety. We provide ATV safety. We provide emergency response. There's an emergency preparedness module, as well as an excellent table on personal protective equipment. So once they've had the 2 days of training, they've passed their driver safety course, we do pass out an evaluation for them. So we can on the spot find out how we did, if there's anything to improve. But we felt that we could do more of a historical aspect. So we came up with a survey, 11 questions on the survey, demographic questions, as well as perceived value questions and open field questions. We allowed either the parent or the student to answer questions simply because we were going back 10 years and we weren't entirely sure if we were able to get a hold of the students. We did send out emails, and where we could not send emails, we sent out through the U.S. Postal Service. And the questions asked were based on the satisfaction of certain components of the previous tractor safety training. We wanted to know how many years they'd worked in agricultural since the tractor safety training. And we also wanted to find out if there's any injuries or near misses since then. And we wanted to know if they had any suggestions for improvement of the course. And as an extra incentive, whoever sent us back a survey, we sent them a bag of PPE. And this is just a graph of the surveys that we sent out. We have sent out 672 mailings so far. We still have to send out 2010 to 2013. That will be an additional 407. So hopefully we'll have 1,092 surveys to send out. And this is just students sent out by year. We did star 2020 and 21 simply because we had fewer students, and that was because of COVID years. And so the survey itself, this is, as I said, is a preliminary survey. We sent out of the 257 emails that we sent out, 33 had bounced back. We've received 37. Of the 672 mailings we sent out, 40 bounced back. And so far we have received 38. And I was just talking to Ellen a couple of days ago, and she said that we've gotten 100 now. So hopefully we're going to continue to get more and more as time goes on. So we've ended up with 75 responses so far. 38 were students. 36 of those were parents, and one was not indicated. Now, of those, we did ask whether or not they had taken the online or in classroom for the first day of the course. 27 of those that had responded were online, and 48 were in classroom. And as you can see on the right, we did ask how many years they had been in agriculture since then. So far, 21 of them is only in their first year. 34 had been in agriculture 2 to 5 years. 16 had been in 5 to 10 years, and 3 had been in over 10 years, and 1 had been not indicated. And this is just my little preliminary analysis of the surveys that we have received so far. We've separated it between students and parents. And this was our Likert scale of, we asked them to choose how important it was on each of these components, either not important at all up to very important. They are all pretty much around the same thing, they thought most of these were important, between 3 and 3.8. I did notice that the homework was 2.87 for the students. So I did go back and look at that. And a few of them, quite simply did not care for the homework, but a few of them also indicated that was not applicable. So it's possible that they just did not have homework for their safety training. And also, we wanted to know if there had been any injuries involved after their safety training. We have had a few that have responded to that. These are here on this chart. All the first top 3, they'd been in years in agriculture, 2 to 5 years. Cow hit the individual in the alley, slipped off the tractor with no rubber step, sprained the ankle. One indicated that there was minor injuries reported, but no lost time for work. And one of them indicated there was an incident that had a significant lost time of work, but there was no injury involved. And also, we want to capture any near misses that they could report. A few of these that you could see here are good, that there was a near miss, turning too sharp with the power takeoff engaged on the feed wagon. Another indicated a proper hitching of the tractor. Another individual, the ATV almost rolled over on that individual. And then this individual had an issue with a boom that almost hit a power line. We also want to know what kind of information they could give us. What would they impart to their students if they could. So these are just a few of the responses that we got. Large equipment hitting objects or structures. They'd like to see more scenarios and decision-making decisions. More medical training and how to do simple repairs on tractors. and more info on tractor hydraulics. And also, of course, we always want recommendations for improvement. I'm just going to pop these up so that you could read them. How to apply a tourniquet, first aid, very important. Make the driving portion harder. Additional driving practice, as well as hooking up implements. Chemical spraying safety, more hands-on training. Don't always use the newest tractors. And also, I put in-person instruction is better than online. I put that in bold because I did see that quite a bit, which surprised me a little bit. But as you could see, another one person put possibly more interactive online training. So it may just be that the online curriculum needs to be adjusted just a little bit. So what's next? We do still have to send out additional surveys from 2010 to 2013. And we're hoping to send one more email out for the participants from 2014 to 22 to hopefully lasso another group of individuals to send us their surveys. And I said that we are getting letters back in the mail as we speak. And when we get done with, we get as many as we possibly can, we will do some analysis on all of those surveys. We're going to compare the student responses to the parent responses on perceived value. We're going to hopefully they're going to be honest and give us any injuries or near misses that they've had over the last 10 years. And we will be doing a qualitative analysis of improvements and perceived value. And finally, this is from one of the surveys that we received. So I'm just going to read it off to you. No matter how long you've been immersed in agriculture, this course will open your eyes to many new things. It could possibly save your life someday. Make sure to take the things you learn back home and possibly educate others on the importance of tractor safety. So stay tuned. Thank you. And I also want to thank Nicholas Lamal down there. He did help us with some of the data analysis. All right. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Becky. Does anybody have a question for Becky that they'd like to ask? That was a great presentation. I think that quote at the end was very powerful and certainly speaks to the need for continued tractor and equipment training, and also certainly the value of those types of training. So thank you for offering those, and thank you for the follow-up that you're doing to help.
Thank you.
Josie, I've got one question from NFMC, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I may have missed this piece, but I think we tend to see a growing number of rural homes or even suburban homes that are buying essentially small compact tractors. And I wonder, has the training for the youth adapted to this higher prevalence of these compact tractors that may be misunderstood as big lawnmowers, when in fact they do have power takeoffs and different things that we need to consider?
I don't have an answer for that, but maybe Ellen can answer that for you.
I sure can. Thank you. And I think one of the limitations of our program is that we have to train on the equipment that is provided to us. So we are at the a lot of times it's the equipment dealer that happens to be in this small town where we are. So we are always grateful to get any piece of equipment that we can get. But I will tell you that part of the curriculum that comes through the InStop program is that it deals with smaller equipment. And we always talk about keeping those ROPS up, because that's one of our biggest concerns with this smaller equipment is that they can put the ROPS down and we see it every day. We see them riding with the ROPS down on the smaller piece of equipment, because I think it's perceived as not as dangerous. So that is, thank you for that question, Cap. It is something that we do cover in the course. But as far as what they get to work on and hitch and unhitch, it's whatever they pull in that morning.
Good question. Thank you. All right, we will transition to our next speaker. Our next presentation is by Sue Schuelke, right? And they'll be presenting their presentation titled Agricultural Safety and Health Curriculum, Preparing for the Next Generation. So Sue, we can see your presentation. Excellent. And we are, there you go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, and you can hear me okay?
We can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Sue Schuelke. I am an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, College of Nursing. And I'm going to report on a grant that was generously provided to us from CS Cash. And my partner in the proposal was Michelle Ellermeyer, and she's unable to join us today, but I want to make sure that she's recognized as a partner in this project. We were funded as a pilot study, and our goal was to incorporate ag safety and health into the curriculum, both on the Lincoln campus and on the Kearney campus. So we had the unique opportunity to have a more urban campus and then a more rural campus. We wanted to incorporate it into the didactic portions of the course, but also introduce immersive virtual reality as a teaching method. So we worked then and partnered with the Computer Science and Engineering College to help develop that game. One of the reasons we looked at this, and Rebecca went through these, this audience knows that agriculture is a risky business, and the rate of injuries and the issues that agricultural workers deal with. One of the other things, though, we need to address is there's a gap in the literature on what's provided to healthcare workers. And what we saw in the literature was there were agrimedicine had articles on PAs, NPs, physicians, and their knowledge, but nowhere did we find any information about what is provided to that direct bedside nurse. So we wanted to introduce more. We were already discussing in populations, which is a third semester course, but we wanted to integrate and intertwine it into every semester. So in our semester one course, which deals a lot with health promotion, we introduced, we always talked about occupational hazards with nursing. We introduced occupational hazards in the agricultural community. And we based a lot of that information off of the course that is offered through the College of Public Health at the university, and took that and condensed it into a basic course for our nurses. In their second semester, they do a project on evidence-based practice where they each pick a topic and then do an extensive literature search and then present a poster on that. So we expanded that to include topics that not only dealt with the concepts from semester 1 and 2, but how those concepts related to agricultural issues. Our semester 3 population health had concepts in it already related to agricultural health, population health, safety, the health disparities, but we added content to that also. That is also where we invited the IVR to be introduced to the nursing students, and then the nursing students took that out to the population. So one of the things we did, we wanted to see the effect of the education. So we did a pre and post survey. We did an independent t-test and looked at were there significant differences in the education level at the beginning of the course, after the and then after the content was introduced. We also looked at were there any differences between the campuses, and kind of to our surprise, there were no significant differences. So we treated them as one. We did have statistical differences between pre and post. So they did improve their perceived knowledge. Again, this is a self-reported knowledge. And we also looked at whether students had been raised on a farm or not raised on a farm. And those students were significantly different before they had the education, but after the education, they were kind of on an equal playing field, and there was no significant difference. Then we looked at people like Rebecca talked about, is if you're going out to work on somebody else's farm. And again, those who had worked on a farm and those who hadn't were statistically different at the beginning. but after the education, they weren't. So the education provided improvement to all student groups, but even more so for those who weren't familiar with the ag industry. And we thought that was interesting. Then we looked at some of the same factors in our second semester. And these were some of the topics that the students picked as far as what to do their in-depth literature search on. And we did pre and post surveys with them before the project and after the project. And we saw improvement in learning, but we did not see statistically significant differences with this group. And we kind of think they had probably those who were familiar with certain topics, picked and identified those that they were interested in. So maybe we didn't see the significant difference we saw when we first introduced the ag concepts in the fall. So as we move forward, we wanted to introduce immersive virtual reality. And this is just one of our students in the lab doing a little VR herself. And one of the reasons we want to use VR, and it will never, never, never replace the hands-on training that Rebecca talked about, to get him out on that tractor, to go through the cones, to move the equipment. But how do we reach them in an engaging way to get them interested in safety? So we want to use immersive virtual reality just for that component. It immerses you. You really do feel like you're in that moment. And there's been a lot of literature about how it engages certain portions of our brain to use IVR. So just a little bit of information here, and slides will be available if you want to look any of these articles up. We collaborated with the computer and science and engineering team, and this is the, I call these my Big Bang Theory guys. They were geniuses. They were wonderful to work with. They took the initiative to go over to the tractor museum on East Campus and really view the different types of tractors. Dr. Yoder, I'm going to give you a shout out at the end, but I'll mention you now. Dr. Yoder from the College of Public Health at UNMC was instrumental in helping these guys understand the physics of the tractor. How do we make it tip over in the game? What kind of terrain are they on? What about front loading with a heavy bale? So we went through a number of different scenarios. How to have you drive fast in the tractor and not get nauseous while you're doing it. That was kind of my biggest deal. Anyway, so then we said, can we take IVR out like we had dreamed of? So we first took it to Haskell Ag Lab Family Days, just a few pictures of the different populations that we used it with. We had men, we had women, we had those who were mature, we had those who were really young. We had people who shouldn't be on tractors doing it. And you'd say, have you ever been on the tractor? Have you driven it? And they're looking at their parent because they know they should say no. But I said, be honest, I just want the truth. And they're like, yeah, but dad only lets me go certain places. So, I mean, these kids are on this big equipment, and we have to convince them that there are safety issues and they're not indestructible. So yes, you can take it on the road. No, you shouldn't put your computer bags where there's a hill of ants. We learned that. We learned we had to dust out or blow dust out of our equipment when we got home. We took our hotspot with us to enhance the capabilities, but we had lines of people coming to use the IVR, and some were hesitant, and we definitely saw that it is a younger age group preference. So what did we do this fall? We continued on with our semester 3 population course. And one of the things I did not expect is I also teach health policy. And we have the students do a project that's called Union of the Scientists, and they pick a topic to look at policies in. And as the students were submitting theirs, I noticed a number of them were submitting ag topics, and that excited me. They were looking at farm worker risk. They were looking at working in hot temperatures. One of them picked a Tyson chicken project, sustainable eating, and it was really interesting, the interest that they were taking in ag projects. We also went to Husker Harvest Days, and we had the students now who we had put in the headsets and done the rollover ranch. We had them helping. A lot of FFA students were at Husker Harvest Days, and I'm just going to share a few of those pictures of different populations. And then the other thing that was very beneficial is the students then went out and explored Husker Harvest Days. helped with grain elevator evacuations, learned to wear corn heads with style. One of the things we did while we were out there is we had the students do surveys on the people who came in and used our IVR. And we asked them what were their safety concerns. And it's what everybody is talking about today. PTOs, ATVs, tractors, chemical safety, sun damage, just general accidents, and then a general knowledge of new machinery and technology. The other question we asked is, do you think IVR is a useful learning modality? And it was a 5-point Likert scale. 75% of the population strongly agreed that it would be. 25% said they agreed it would be. And we didn't have anybody that said neither disagree or strongly disagree. And we also used a QR code. So if they didn't want to stay and answer our paper copy, they could do the QR code. And actually, when we were at Haskell Ag Days, we just used the QR code and didn't really have a great response. So we thought it was better to catch them while they were there. We also developed, just based on the ag safety, tractor safety manual, some quick tips. So it opened the door for us. And we did have some students that said, okay, I'm coming back this afternoon and I'm going to make sure I crash my tractor. And so they would come back and they would do all the things I told them not to do. They didn't put their ROPS up. They'd go fast on a hill. They'd load up the front. And when they crashed, at least they get a message in the game and it says, this is why it happened. These are the kind of injuries you would sustain. So where do we go from here? We have posted our Rollover Ranch game on SideQuest VR, so it's open to the public, free for anybody to upload. And the interesting thing is we've had over 2,000 views on the game. And I'd like to say I gave you a sample of what the comments are, but these are the comments. We've gotten 2 comments so far. So, you know, we haven't really advertised it, but it is out there. And if you go out to SideQuest and you put in tractor, it is the only game that comes up. And we had to spend $60 to buy a good tractor from Unity because there isn't a very good model out there. Cheapest tractor I ever bought. Anyway, our future plans, we want to expand the game. So this is the group of computer science and engineering students we're working with this fall. And we had been approached to include ATV safety and electrical safety. Nebraska Public Power approached us if we could add that in. And then I listened to Rebecca and say the things that people reported to her was my ATV almost tipped over and I almost, you know, flipped my boom out into a power line. And it brings home that is real information. And this is just 2 ATV accidents I've heard about just this fall. I was up in Northeast Nebraska at a wedding and heard the sad story about the Hardington boy. And then we live around the rural Lincoln area in Waverly, and a Malcolm man had his ATV out at the speedway doing something, don't know why, but it tipped over on him. And that's just in the last few months. So it makes it meaningful. We also are looking at a mail-out program, working with the Kasner College on East Campus, and are looking for funds. And we've put in a few grants and we'll continue to look for that funding. What we'd like to do is purchase headsets then that we can mail out to the FFA programs. I've talked with the FFA, some of the FFA leaders in the state of Nebraska. We'll be going to the Ag Ed Symposium and presenting to them on Saturday about the potential. And headsets are really coming down in cost, that even if they could purchase 1 or 2 headsets at their high schools, and they could use the games that we're developing to, again, open that door for that conversation and capture that young agricultural workers' attention. So I wanted, again, special thanks to CS Catch for the funding. None of this would have been possible without them. None of it would be possible without the computer science and engineering senior design students, both groups we've worked with. It wouldn't have been possible if Dr. Yoder had not provided his ag expertise and helped us develop the right physics in the game. Just a couple personal pictures to pray for us as we try to get harvest done before Christmas. And this is my 10-month-old, and it is her first harvest. So she's been out in the field also. Any questions? And I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was so interesting and really interesting educational technology that I think we're really excited to see take off and hopefully get into classrooms and onto the faces of young people who need to learn a little bit more about tractor safety and perhaps other types of safety. Does anybody have a question for Sue?
I see Robin posted something in the chat. Robin, please reach out to me. It's just sue.schuelke@unmc.edu. Aaron, thank you for posting the link. So if anybody wants to load the game, they can load it and kind of get an idea. Know also that our group this fall is working on some of the bugs that the last group did not have time for. This is a year-long project, but these are kids in school. And so we're fixing a few of the things we noticed as we're out there using it with the general public. Yes, you do need VR goggles for the game. And right now you can purchase a Quest 2 for the latest one for $299. So although that seems like a lot of kids are using them at home and have them. Dr. Yoder has some sets at home. I have some sets at home, and it is really, if you have not been in a headset, it is really interesting.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Sue, for your presentation. We will move on. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to Sue in the chat. Next, we will hear from Jenna Gibbs. Jenna will be presenting ATV safety design features, examining cultural awareness and piloting an educational program among U.S. young adults in agriculture. So Jenna, we are seeing your slides. Everything looks fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So this is also a pilot project funded by CS Cash. And so it's Aaron Yoder. This is your time to shine because Aaron was also a really instrumental scientific advisor to this project. So just a little background about this project. We were really interested in advancing our ATV safety training program to young adults and talking a little bit more about engineering controls instead of just highlighting personal protective equipment and administrative controls. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. So we recently published a paper a couple of years ago in the Journal of Agro-Medicine based on an abstract that we presented at a conference where we interviewed more than 800 Midwestern young adults. And we found that over half of them reported rolling an ATV, yet we saw quite some unsafe behaviors, such as a lot of them allowing extra riders and only 18% wearing helmets. So we continue to really train these young adults on the importance of these administrative controls and helmet use. But it was a little bit depressing because 2 months later, we would do a post survey in our pre and post survey model, and very few young adults reported changing any of these behaviors. So we kind of started to brainstorm a little bit more what we could do and how we could change our training program to be more effective. And just a really quick plug here for the Great Plains Center. The first few episodes in the FarmSafe podcast really do focus on this. And we have a whole podcast about this, ATV safety features and engineering features. So if you're interested in that, you can certainly give that a listen. It's longer than today's presentation. So this is just some background information. So I really liked listening to the last presenter because she said that at Husker Harvest Days, some people said that ATV safety was a concern. Before every Gear Up for Ag program, we ask the young adult participants one thing they want to learn about agricultural health and safety, and that's it. We try not to lead them in the question. It's often the first thing we ask them on the survey. And in the past 2 years, no one thinks of ATV safety or ATV UTV use when we first ask them about agricultural health and safety with no preconceptions. So I just want you to think about that. A lot of times when young adults come into our training programs, ATVs are not at the front of their mind. So last year we developed a new ATV safety curriculum focusing on engineering controls. And of course, that also meant highlighting the other safety controls in the NIOSH hierarchy of controls. And this really included a new motion graphic to highlight all of this. The motion graphic's 2 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and play it. And I think I have shared my sound. So Josie, if you guys can't hear it, let me know.
Did you know that half of all work-related deaths on ATVs involve agriculture? Studies have demonstrated that most of the deaths are caused by rolling the ATVs. This trend is observed in many countries. Imagine what it would feel like to have up to 700 pounds on top of your body. Most rollover incidents cause several injuries to the head and chest. In the last 20 years, injuries have become even more severe due to larger ATVs. There are several hazards experienced while operating an ATV. Unstable, sloped terrain, and collisions are just a few of the hazards related to agriculture. Prevention strategies are important. Start by wearing colorful, reflective clothing and use proper protective equipment like helmets, non-skid shoes, and gloves. Resist the urge to work with multiple riders, and always remember to tell your family and coworkers where you're going. The most effective way to prevent ATV deaths is with proper equipment. You may be able to save a life by considering installation of crush protection devices and looking for high stability products. Be sure to choose the appropriate vehicle for the size of the operator. A crush protection device is designed to protect the operator if the vehicle rolls over. It's designed to stop a continuous roll and divert the machine away from the rider. Basic maintenance also helps. Recommended and equal tire pressure reduces the risk of rolling. Check wheel lug nuts. Also, make sure that other systems like the brakes are working.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and advance. So that motion graphic obviously is one piece of the pie. We very rarely just share a motion graphic and hop on to the next topic. So a lot of times we share these motion graphics in a describe and discuss format where we'll introduce the topic, share the motion graphic, and then the presenter at the front of the room will go into greater detail. And at several locations, we did have crush protection devices and we handed them out and let the students look about them and look at them and talk to them. Of course, last year, the reality was that a lot of this training was being done online. So that way we had to use the chat box to get feedback from students, which was the reality. So we worked with Aaron Yoder and others to put in some really useful survey questions on ATV safety and especially engineering controls. And we just asked about some general ATV use on the farm, rollover incidents, and those safety behaviors, as well as awareness of different engineering controls that can be put on after the ATV has been purchased or considered at the point of purchase. So we'll be talking about that today. So for this project, we looked at about 238 students in the Midwest, they all in the United States. 1/3 of them were female. We had a pretty even split between participants at universities and community college agricultural programs. And again, about half of them had an on-site training. And just the biggest takeaway from this is a lot of the students are using ATVs for farm work, males more than females, which isn't really surprising. And the youth ATV use really replicates what we see in the recent ATV use on the farm. In fact, it's interesting. The youth ATV use is even higher than the ATV use that young adults report in the last year. So really, if you think about it, people have been on ATVs and using them for farm work for quite a long time, even by the time that we get to them. And when we interviewed our participants, about half of them, similar to what we published in the Journal of Agro-Medicine a couple of years ago, half report rolling an ATV and a quad, And we get a lot of great stories in class. We use those storytelling moments to highlight this as a big safety concern. So looking at more of the results into the survey, we asked students, please to select any of the features of ATVs that you're familiar with. So these are just some that can be considered at the point of purchase: roll cages, wide frames, and stability ratings. And you'll see that we have Canadian males and females on here, although I have to say there's not extreme differences between the Canadians and the US. So a lot of the students, around 60% of the students, were familiar with the roll cages and had seen that on ATVs and UTVs too. Of course, less were familiar that you could get ATVs with a wider frame and that those had better stability ratings. So we kind of learned that promoting the stability rating and promoting looking for wider frames might be somewhere to venture into the future. And then there's several ATV safety features that can be considered even after you've purchased your ATV. So we looked at some of the awareness of those features as well. And a lot of people are aware of windshields, although that's kind of weird because a windshield isn't going to prevent a rollover. Several people were aware of helmets and that the helmet had to be Department of Transportation certified, although we will get into a little bit more. It seems like the females, especially the females in the United States, weren't quite aware of the helmets as the males. And then we have safety flags. CPD stands for that crush protection device. Pretty low awareness of crush protection devices in the United States and Canada, less than 20%. OEM stands for original equipment manufacturer accessories. So if you're going to be putting on toolboxes or trailers or spraying devices on your ATV, there have been some studies shown that it's less likely to roll or tilt or have problems if that accessory was made by the original manufacturer so that it can stay in place. And then lastly, we have GPS rollover alarms, which not very many people were familiar with. So again, very interesting that the Canadian males, 30%, almost 30% of them were aware of those original equipment manufacturer accessories, but not much else. Then we kind of, on this table, and I've put the main takeaways down the bottom so that you don't even really have to look at it. We have our pre-test percentage and our post-test percentage, and we're trying to compare these. One with the pre-test was taken 1 week before our safety program, and the post-test was taken 2 months after. 2 months is a long time to get the participants to think about this stuff. And we did see some shifts in helmet use and the allowance of extra riders, which was interesting. In fact, these shifts were more positive when we brought in this motion graphic and discussing the engineering features. So we did something a little bit better this time around than the past time. But these post-test survey responses, if you see the post-test survey responses are much lower. It's hard to get these students to respond to the post-survey 2 months after the training program. So this is a big weakness. These responses are likely to be biased by these response rates. Although it was hopeful, I guess, that 30 to 40% of the participants said they were likely, or at least somewhat likely, to consider crush protection devices after the program. So having those crush protection devices on the motion graphic and handing them out and letting students look at those really seemed to make a difference. But the biggest difference was probably qualitative, not quantitative. So remember, prior to the program, I told you 0% of students were really even thinking about ATV safety on the farm. And at the end of our trainings, we really like to ask the question what their single biggest takeaway from the entire training was. And about almost a quarter of students say something related to ATV safety. I feel like our ATV safety training of our program is pretty strong since we have David Sullivan on our team from Quad Bar Industries. So that may have something to do with it. But these are just some big takeaways that students wrote down. And if we look at the ATV biggest takeaways and we try to group those into sections, Most takeaways are related to the motion graphic or the related discussion that we talked about through the related discussion. So most takeaways do have to deal with that crush protection device and just not knowing that CBDs were available. And then some people, even 7%, said their biggest takeaway was an actual ATV stat that was directly cited in the video. So that's kind of interesting. So if you look at this pie chart, you can see that a lot of those engineering controls are mentioned. So this is just our summary. ATV use begins at young ages. This makes these old habits difficult to change. About half of our participants have rolled their ATVs, report unsafe behaviors. It seems like a lot of participants are remembering the material from the motion graphic. Highlighting engineering controls is not only higher up the hierarchy of controls, but it may get people thinking about other methods of prevention. We know kind of the awareness of these engineering controls and what can be done to promote them. And then our goal is to take this to the ATV manufacturers because we think that they can benefit from safer design and promoting safe accessories at the point of purchase. So we just, again, this was a pilot project from the Central States Center for Agricultural Safety and Health. So we couldn't have done it without them. We couldn't have done it without Aaron Yoder's input and David Sullivan's input. So we're just thankful. And if you guys have any questions about our motion graphic or, other things that we can include in our ATV safety training portion of our program, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Does anybody have a question for Jenna? This is a really important topic. I think a lot of us are very familiar with receiving news alerts about ATV, UTV fatalities in our areas. So this is an incredibly important topic. Well, Jenna's available by chat. I see Chuck Jennissen is ready to go, so we will let him. Dr. Jennissen will be presenting Adolescent All-Terrain Vehicle Exposure and the Association of Training Course Certification with Safety Behaviors and Crash Experiences. You have the floor.
Hey, Josie, is my presenter, is it the presenter view right now, or is it on the right?
Nope, we see the correct slide. Yep, presentation.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. I'm going to move it over here then. Super. I'm really happy to present here about ATVs as well. And I'd like to thank my collaborators on this project that are listed below here. Every hour, about 11 people are seen in a hospital ED with a ATV-related injury. Almost 4 of them will be a child less than 16 years of age. More children, in fact, less than 16 years die each year in the United States from ATVs than from bicycle crashes. A study was done recently by the National Farm Medicine Center. They looked at 2015 and 2016 data from the aginjurynews.org that they have, and they found that ATVs and side-by-sides were the second most common source of injury, death, in agriculture across all ages in that database, and that it was the leading cause of injury and death in agriculture among youth 0 to 17 years of age. Now, a lot of times we recommend that people get training. So there's ATV training certification courses that are available and are often recommended, but they're not really required for people to ride ATVs, especially on private land. Although, for example, in Iowa and a lot of states, you do need to get certification if you're a youth and you're riding on public lands like off-highway vehicle parks. Despite our recommendations, there's really little data regarding the impact of training courses on safety behaviors. So that's one of the things we wanted to kind of take a look at with this study. So our goals were to determine adolescents' exposure to ATVs and a crash injury experience, look at factors associated with having completed an ATV training certification course, and then also look at the impact of that ATV training certification on riding behaviors. So the University of Iowa Stead Family Children's Hospital Iowa Off-Road Vehicle Task Force, we've been presenting our STARS program, our Safety Tips for ATV Riders program, to students at schools, primarily in Iowa. During that program that we do in the classroom, we present our 10 STARS, which are listed here. And this program is sponsored by Grinnell Mutual Insurance. So we've been collecting 1 year. So 1 year after the STARS program, we've have surveys be done in the classrooms of that participated in the STARS program to look at our long-term outcome of the effect of the STARS program. But we also have a number of other questions on that survey, and that's where this study I'm going to talk about here today also is from. We did frequency, chi-square, and logistic regression analyses with SAS software. So there were almost 5,000 students from 30 school districts that completed a survey from fall 2012 to fall 2019, 1 year after completing the STARS program. Almost 3,000 of them completed a revised version that concluded questions on ATV riding frequency, ATV crash, and crash-related injury, and their riding behaviors in the previous 12 months. They're pretty much equivalent proportions of males and females. Ages range from 10 to 18 years, but about 3/4 of them are really from 12 to 14 years of age. About 1/5 of them lived on a farm. Another 1/5 lived in the country, but not on the farm, and almost 3/5 of them lived in a town, which really are mostly medium to smaller towns in Iowa. Over 3/4 of them had ridden an ATV. Just over 2/5 of them said their family owned an ATV. And of those that had been on an ATV, 2/5 rode at least weekly, and then over 3/5 of them said they rode at least monthly. And if you look at what they're doing with their ATVs, just over half did recreation only. But almost half of them did do work. 6% did only work, no recreation. But a large proportion did both occupational work, usually farm-related activities, as well as recreation. Now, so this is a kind of looking at basically work versus recreation. I combined there with these colored circles here. So males had higher proportions of doing work than females, but really a lot of females are doing work with ATVs as well. Those who families owned ATVs had a higher proportion that did work with the ATV than those that did not own ATV. And if you look at for where they lived, not surprisingly, almost 4/5 of those that lived on farm were actually using ATVs for work. Half of them that lived in the country but not on a farm did. But still, even those that lived in town, given that these are smaller towns and so forth, medium-sized towns, still almost 2/5 of them reported doing work with ATVs. We did some logistic regression analysis regarding the likelihood to do work with an ATV. And that's where you control the other variables in the analysis. So those are all the variables listed there. So doing that, males were almost twice as likely as females to do work with the ATV. Students whose families own ATVs almost 4 times more likely than those that didn't own an ATV in their family. And students who lived on farms were over 4 times more likely than those that lived in town doing agricultural work with ATV. We asked a few other questions. We asked them if they ever had participated in organized competitive ATV racing. 9% of the students said they had, and 15% said they had ridden in a public off-highway vehicle park. Only 8% had completed an ATV training certification course. Now, I have to say that we did not ask them whether they had a hands-on portion to their course that they participated in. A lot of these can be done online now. And so, for example, in Iowa, you can ride in an off-highway vehicle park if you have a certification course that's from online. So we know that 8% completed some ATV training certification course. We're not certain if they had really a hands-on component to that training. If we look at who had higher proportions having completed a training, if families that own an ATV had higher proportion than those that didn't, though again, it's only 11% of those that own an ATV. Those that drove more frequently had higher proportions, stating they had completed a certification course. Those that did organize competitive racing, again, a little bit higher proportion that had completed a training course. Those that had ridden a public off-highway vehicle park had higher proportions. But again, I was saying that really to drive an off-highway vehicle park in Iowa, you're supposed to have this training. yet only 1/5 of them said that they had. And then actually those that did work with them had a higher proportion of completing a training. But again, these are not very high proportions of the students that had taken a certification course. Doing logistic regression analysis regarding the likelihood of completing an ATV training certification course, and then controlling for all those variables listed there. Students whose families own ATVs were over 1.5 times more likely than those that didn't of having completed a course. Frequent riders, those at least weekly, over 1.5 times more likely than those that rode monthly or less. Public off-highway vehicle park users are about twice as likely as those who hadn't hadn't been ridden in a park. And students from farms over 1.5 times more likely than those living in a town. So of those that had completed training, we found that a higher proportion stated they always or almost always wore a helmet. So 39% versus 20% of those that did not complete training. They also had fewer that said they never or almost never wore a helmet. So 29% said they almost never wore a helmet, but those who hadn't completed in a training, 58% of them said they never or almost never wore a helmet. If you look at some other safety behaviors, those that completed training had lower proportions that reported riding as or with passengers, 63% versus 96%. And also fewer that reported riding on public roads, 41% versus 50%. We asked the students whether they had been in a crash in the previous 12 months, which we define as having a rollover, a collision with an object, or being ejected from the vehicle. Over 1/5 of them said they had been in a crash in the past year. Of those that had been in a crash, about 7% had an injury that required medical attention. As far as the proportions having a crash, males had higher proportions than females. Those that lived in farm had higher proportion than those that lived elsewhere. Those that own an ATV, family owned an ATV, had higher proportions than those that didn't. And those that did recreation had higher proportions than those that did rode ATVs for work only. Certainly there was a big relationship with how frequently the students rode ATVs and their likelihood or their proportions having had an ATV crash in the past 12 months, with decreasing proportions as they rode less frequently on them. And you can see those with almost daily use, almost half of them had had a crash in the past 12 months. Those that participated in organized competitive racing, over half of them had had a crash in the past 12 months. And if we look at some unsafe behaviors, so riding with passengers, those that rode with passengers had higher proportions than those that didn't, and those riding on public roads had higher proportions reporting having a crash than those that didn't ride on public roads. As far as some logistic regression analysis regarding likelihood of having been in a crash, controlling for all those variables listed there, males were almost twice as likely as females. Those who did both work and recreation riding with ATVs, almost twice as likely as those that did work only. Those are recreational only riders, almost 2.5 times more likely than those who did work only with the ATV. And almost daily riders were over 4 times more likely than those that had ridden ATVs only several times a year or less. Organized competitive racers, over 3 times more likely than those who weren't. And then students riding with passengers, almost twice as likely as those who didn't ride with passengers, and those who had ridden on public roads, almost twice as likely as those who didn't. One thing that was interesting to me is that once you control for all those variables like frequency of riding and those kind of things, then having lived on a farm or in the country but not on a farm, having likely have had a crash in the 12 months were no different than those who were living in town. So a lot of these other factors are more important than probably just the fact that they lived on the farm. And I mentioned all the good things about those that had done training certification course and how they had lower proportions. One thing we did see is that if you just look at the proportions that had a crash in the last year, those that had a certification course had actually a higher proportion of having a crash. But then when you control for all these variables like frequency of use and all that, then there was no difference between those that had certification course and those that didn't. So Iowa adolescents have really a high exposure to ATVs. Most use ATVs for recreation, but there's a really significant proportion who use them for work as well. Crashes and resulting injuries are common. Safety training certification completion is very infrequent among ATV riders. We in the group in our study was only about 8%. And those who completed training had more frequent helmet use and were less likely to ride with passengers or on public roads. So really increasing education training, having kids actually complete a training certification course would likely increase safe riding behaviors and decrease ATV related injuries and deaths. So I'd be happy to take any questions related to this presentation. I'm going to actually present some about ROVs right after this, but does anybody have any questions?
Does anybody have any questions for Chuck? If not, I think you can go ahead and share your next presentation. Dr. Jennissen will present on recreational off-highway vehicle exposure, safety behaviors, and crash experiences of adolescents.
Okay. Let's see if I can. I know I had it up, so why is I not finding it on my screen here? Maybe it's here. Oh boy, sorry about this.
You're okay.
I'm trying to figure out how I can get back onto get the screen up that shows I can share. There we go, maybe. There we go. And is it showing right now or no?
We see it, but it's in like it's not in a presentation mode.
Okay.
There. That looks great.
And is it full slide or is it just the presenter view right now?
Nope, it's full slide.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, sorry for that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about recreational off-highway vehicles and a study that we did. Again, I'd like to thank my fellow collaborators listed on this slide. That's interesting. Okay, so I would like to talk about UTVs here briefly. So by federal definition, UTVs are actually vehicles that travel less than 25 miles per hour. They're probably exemplified by the old style John Deere Gator that's pictured at the left side here. But also like Kubota here has a UTV that travels less than 25 miles per hour. Because of their speed, they don't have to have a rollover protective structure or seat belts, but some of them do, like some of this Kubota model right here. But what I really want to talk about is recreational off-highway vehicles. These vehicles travel greater than 30 miles per hour. Most of them travel highway speeds. They have the sport type models as well as multi-purpose, which we more typically see on ranches and farms. It has a bed at the back to make it a little more utilitarian value for work on farms. And all these vehicles, because they can travel so fast, have a rollover protective structure and either a harness system or seat belts at each seating position. Although these are recreational off-highway vehicles by federal definition, they've become basically synonymous with UTVs now. So when people are talking about UTVs, often they're talking about these recreational off-highway vehicles. So really the first recreational off-highway vehicles were introduced in the late 1900s. Quickly their sales skyrocketed. In fact, now if you look at estimated worldwide sales of ROVs versus ATVs, ROVs outsell ATVs. That's starting in about 2016. And that gap is increasing still. These vehicles are increasingly valuable assets in work settings, especially in agriculture. We surveyed attendees of the 2015 and 2016 Iowa FFA Leadership Conference, where we had over 2,000 surveys completed. And over a third of them said that their families own an ROV, but those that lived on farm, our ownership was really over 3/4 that had an ROV. Over 4/5 of all the FFA members said they had ridden an ROV. And of those that had been on an ROV in the past year, 2/3 of them had done work with the ROV. So the most important safety rule is to always wear your seatbelt so that you stay within the critical zone of protection afforded by the rollover protective structure, and also never carry more passengers in spots with seatbelts and no passengers in the bed. A study that was done by the Consumer Product Safety Commission looking at 428 crashes that involved 900 vehicle occupants found that over 4/5 of those unrestrained were fully or partially ejected, and that ejected riders were 8 times more likely to have died than riders who weren't ejected, and riders pinned by the vehicle were almost 5 times more likely to have died. One thing I do want to point out is that most ROVs are not designed for or recommended to be driven by children less than 16 years of age, although we know that's not really happening in a lot of families. In fact, in the manuals, it'll often say that a person who cannot rest their feet on the floor with their back against the seat while restrained should not even be riding an ROV. And you can see that this girl here in this picture, that she can't have really a seatbelt on properly if she's going to be being able to reach those foot pedals to operate the vehicle. And the Dachshund is not really a very good airbag. So this is a problem a lot of times with kids on these vehicles. In fact, a lot of owner miles say that there really should be no passengers less than 12 years of age. Well, in this study, we wanted to determine Iowa's adolescents' exposure to ROVs and their use of restraint devices, and describe the frequency of adolescent ROV crashes and which populations are at increased risk. So I just mentioned about our STARS program. And this particular study, during the program, we asked a number of questions to help be able to then see how they're doing and follow up in comparison. But as part of that, we did ask some ROV questions during the actual program. And so that's where this study is from data collected actually at the time of the STARS program in the schools. We used Turning Point to help collect that data, and then we did some frequency chi-square and logistic regression analysis. So over 4,000 students from 18 school districts completed the survey with ROV questions. Over 2,000 of them completed the revised version that included questions on ROV frequency, seatbelt use, and crashes in the previous 12 months. Again, equivalent proportions of males and females, 3/4 of them were 11 to 14 years of age. About 1/5 lived on a farm, about 1/4 lived in the country but on a farm, and about 55% lived in a town. Again, not really urban centers, but usually small to medium-sized kind of Iowa towns. Over 2/3 of them reported riding an ROV in the past 12 months. As you can see, almost 1/5 of them, almost 1/4 of them said they rode an ROV almost daily, and almost 2/5 of them said they rode at least weekly on an ROV. And if we look at the proportions who had ever ridden an ROV, males were, even though we have such high numbers, we have some statistical significance here, but really, not that much difference as far as ever ridden on an ROV, 70 versus 67% for males versus females. You can see that the older the age, a slightly higher proportion stated they had ridden an ROV. Certainly those that lived on farms had higher proportions than those that lived in country, not on farm or in the town. But still, even in town, 3/5 of them said they had ridden an ROV. And if you would look at the frequency of ATV riding, was definitely associated with them having ridden an ROV. So those that rode ATVs at least weekly, 90% of them said they had ridden an ROV. And if they were monthly or less riders of ATVs, almost 4/5 had been an ROV, and those had not ridden an ATV ever in the past 12 months, I should say, over just 2/5 of them said they had ridden an ROV. And then doing logistic regression analysis regarding the likelihood of having ridden an ROV, students who lived in the country but not farms, over 1.5 times more likely than those from towns of having had been on an ROV. And then those who lived on farms, over 4 times more likely than those that lived in towns. So looking at frequency of riding ROVs, you can see that males did have a higher proportion of riding at least weekly as compared to females. There was kind of a trend for older, well, actually not that much difference, but for some reason, our 14 to 15-year-olds had a lower proportion. Those greater than 16 had a higher proportion of riding at least weekly. Those living on farms, almost 3/5 of them said they rode at least weekly, and those that lived in the country, not farm, and in town had lower proportions. Doing a logistic regression analysis as far as the likelihood of riding at least weekly, males a little more likely than females. Students living in country, not farms, about 1.4 times more likely than those from town, and students who lived on farms over 5 times more likely than those from towns of riding at least weekly on our ROVs. Well, what about seatbelt use? So about 36% said they always or almost always wore their seatbelt when riding an ROV, while about the same proportion, 37% said they never or almost never did. So this is a high proportion that's really at high risk if they would roll this vehicle over and be ejected for serious injury or even death. If we look at some variables related to this, you can see that males had lower proportions that said they always or almost always that wore their seatbelt, and higher proportions that said they never or almost never did. There's definitely a relationship between age and wearing the seatbelts. With the youngest, 11 years of age and younger, almost just over half of them said they always or almost wore their seatbelt, and decreasing proportions with those 16 years of age and older, only 19% saying they always or almost always did. And if you look at never or almost never, again, that's the opposite. 65% of those 16 years of age or older said they never or almost never wore their seatbelt when in an ROV. Again, differences, those that live on farms, much lower percentages of saying they always or almost always wore their helmet, and wore their seatbelt, sorry. And almost half of them said they never or almost never wore their seatbelt. Also, association with wearing their seatbelt and the frequency. So the most frequent riders, almost daily, only 20% of them said they always or almost always wore their helmet, while those who are infrequent riders, almost half of them said they wore always or almost always wear their seatbelt. And then, of course, with the almost daily riders, most of them, or about half of them, said they never or almost never wear their seatbelt. And then those that have been in an ROV crash in the past year, only a quarter of them said they always or almost always wear their seatbelt. And you can see that 50% of them who've been in a crash said they never or almost never did, which was significant proportions different than those had not been in an ROV crash. So the people that probably most need to have their seatbelt on are not wearing them. And then with logistic regression analysis, controlling for these variables, males almost 1.5 times more likely than females to say they never or almost never wear their seatbelt. Older ages, increasing proportions of never or almost never, with those 16 years of age and older, over 4 times more likely than those that were 11 years of age and younger as far as never or almost never wearing their seatbelt. Almost daily ROV riders were over 1.5 times more likely than those who rode their ROVs several times a year or less. And students who lived on farms, almost 1.5 times more likely than those from towns, saying they never, almost never use their seatbelt. And then students who had been in an ROV crash, also over 1.5 times more likely than those not in a crash to say they never, almost never wore a seatbelt. As far as been in an ROV crash in the past 12 months, males were higher proportions than females. Those living on farms, again, higher proportions than those living elsewhere. The more frequent the rider, the more likely having a crash, with almost daily riders having 56% stating they had been a crash in the past 12 months. And those who have been in an ROV crash in the 12 months also had higher proportions, having had an ROV crash in the past 12 months, almost half of them. And then some logistic regression analysis looking at likelihood of having an ROV crash. Almost monthly riders almost over 3.5 times more likely than those who rode less frequently. and almost once a week riders, 5 times more likely than those who rode several times a year or less, and almost daily riders, 10 times more likely than those who rode several times a year or less. And students who have been in an ATV crash in the past year, almost 4.5 times more likely than those who had not been in an ATV crash have had an ROV crash in the past 12 months. So in conclusions, Iowa adolescents frequently ride ROVs and often without a helmet, without a seat belt, and this puts them at greater risk for serious injury or death should they have a rollover. Almost 30% of the riders have had an ROV-related crash in the past year, which we defined as rolling over, hitting something, or being ejected from the vehicle. And these results suggest that youth may engage in unsafe ROV riding behaviors and experience crashes as a result, and further suggests that they are a high-risk riding population that would benefit from targeted safety education and other injury prevention efforts. So thank you very much. I don't know if we'll have any time for questions, but I appreciate it being able to present.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have a quick question for Dr. Jennissen? Okay, we are going to move on to the Flash Talk portion of the day. I know we're running behind. I appreciate everybody who is able to stay and continue to participate. We hope you're enjoying lunch while you learn. The first Flash Talk for the day will be by Aaron Yoder. Dr. Yoder will be presenting on Ag Safety for You 2.0, an online training program. We see your screen. There we go. Looks good.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Perfect. So thanks for having me. And it's great to hear my name several times today. So thank you, everybody, for promoting us and some of the work you do. We couldn't do all that stuff without your great collaboration. So just more reason for conferences like this and the networking. Looking forward to someday maybe getting back face-to-face with people. It's kind of refreshing when we have those meetings, although everybody, their social bubbles or social places have got a lot bigger. But I've already used 30 seconds of my time, which laid me at the question, how much time do I have for the Flash Talk? All right, I'll just keep talking.
3 to 5 minutes, Aaron.
All right, so that'll be doable. So today what I'm talking about is an online safety training program. And again, I didn't introduce myself. Aaron Yoder from the University of Nebraska Medical Center and the Central State Center for Ag Safety and Health. There is a poster of this. If you click on the link in the agenda on the website, it takes you to the poster version of this as well. So the course I'm talking about today is the course that when we heard Becky speak earlier today, that we've been using this as one of the online training components to our tractor safety training. And I was glad to hear the comments about it not being interactive enough, because as you can see from the title of this is 2.0. So this is the interactive version. Hopefully that feedback came from the previous version of this course. So this is an online course that we have a digital badge associated with. And it gives an overview of hazards common to farm and agricultural businesses, rural agricultural businesses and others related to agriculture. It is based on the National Safe Tractor and Machinery Operation Program, however you want to pronounce that acronym. So it does have quite a bit of tractor and machinery stuff in it, but also some other general agricultural hazards. A joint effort between us, Penn State, and Ohio State. Just a little bit about the sections that are in it, just to give you an idea of that. Again, broken down into 6 different areas. One, just a general introduction of agriculture and types of risks. Some safety basics that cover everything from the types of injuries we typically see youth involved in, to the right type of clothing, how to communicate with others like hand signals, and then personal protective equipment. In the third module, which is the agricultural hazards, goes into some of the general agricultural type hazards, from the mechanized equipment to animals to electrical stuff. Again, some of the same topics that we've talked about already today. And then we get a little bit more into the tractor and some of the sections in operating tractors and machinery. First, the tractor itself and some of those hazards like rollovers that were mentioned a couple times, both with tractors and ATVs today. and then using implements with the tractor. And again, the basis of the NSTMOP program is that it complies with that regulation that Becky talked about, allowing 14 and 15-year-olds to work and operate equipment on farms other than their parents. And then finally, the topic of ATVs, which has been hot the past few presentations, is under the materials handling section, along with skid steers and other utility vehicles. I think now we might even have some telehandlers built into there and other equipment that we handle other materials with other than just tractors. So there is an evaluation as part of this training program, which means they need to pass online quizzes. There's a quiz at the end of each one of these 6 modules, and they have to score at least a 70 or better. And then they receive their certificate, which they can print, as well as a digital badge. And we won't take time to discuss digital badges. This is what the picture looks like for the digital badge, but there's a lot of information attached to it, like who certifies the badge, what are the main concepts that are taught during the badge, and all that is on a web page that describes the digital badge that someone receives. They can collect these and put them in a digital backpack. I think we're missing an opportunity with iSash. We could put them on an iSash, but it's tough to talk when I don't see your faces. How do we find the course? So the actual course, if you just Google Ag Safety for You, do a search, do a Bing, whatever you like to do, you'll find Ag Safety for You, the certificate course. Click on that. It takes you to the e-extension page that gives you all the information you need to know. We also use that acronym, the Ag Safety for You, on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube for some of the supporting materials and advertising for this course and other courses related to it. So that's the page that you see on the e-extension site. When you click on that, that link's on the website as well. When you go into the training, I think, yeah. So when you click on to sign up for the training, there is the opportunity, and we have people buy these in bulk, like a classroom. So there are some discounts if you purchase multiple seats in the course. So we have people do that as well. And you can register for that. So the more you buy, it's a little bit cheaper, but the price is $10. I just should have mentioned first. Inside the training, it looks similar to this. There you can see the 6 different modules, the survey that they have to complete before you get the certificate at the end of it. And we're working on right now, we've had a whole lot of students go through this in the past year. So hopefully by next year's conference and some of the other conferences, we'll have some of that data to provide related to the course. So the new version was just released earlier this year. We used it a lot this summer when we did our tractor safety trainings, and now we're starting to evaluate some of that data. This is just an example of when you go into a lesson 1, there's some ebooks that we have laid out in there, and then the quizzes at the end of the lessons. This is an example of some of the interactive stuff. There's a word match where you have to drag the words into the different parts of it, just to make it. Before, it was just pretty much all reading and watching videos. Now there's a few educational components like, word matches and other things along those lines that you check your responses and then move on from there. So it's a little more interactive now. This is an example of the web page that explains the digital badge. So when you have that digital badge, so it has the criteria at the bottom that they had to pass these different quizzes and do a feedback survey to get the digital badge, and that it basically doesn't have an expiration date. So digital badges are something we're trying to incorporate more to encourage people to do some of the courses. And that's all that I have. I think I've used all my time. So if there's any questions, I don't know if we take those now or move on to the next speaker, but I will get out of sharing.
Yeah, if you stop sharing, I see Kathryn has a question in the chat. What software program are you using?
So it's a Moodle platform, is the learning platform that e-extension uses. So we're doing this through e-extension. We found when we put things on university websites that people discriminate against certain universities. So the e-extension platform made it less threatening to some people. because when we used to do it through Penn State's platform, they'd call it the Penn State Tractor Safety Course, and it wasn't really. So people from Nebraska weren't as interested in doing it. So eExtension uses the Moodle platform. So we have that built into there. And I have somebody that knows way more about interactive online learning, build those modules and plug them in to the Moodle platform.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that presentation. We'll move on. If you have questions for Aaron, I'm sure he'd be happy to facilitate those in the chat. We'll turn things over to Kathryn Crawford, who will be talking about FarmSafe from a seed to a podcast. So Kate, if you want to. Excellent.
Okay, sorry about that. So I take it you can see it and you can hear me now. So thank you for the opportunity and thanks to folks for sticking around. So I'm Kate Crawford. I'm working with the Great Plains Center. And so the goals of the center are to improve awareness of health and safety risk factors faced by ag workers and to disseminate prevention tools. We also work to keep communication channels open between the center and farmers and their advocates, to one, kind of evaluate how we're meeting those goals, but also to stay aware of emerging issues. And then, like we've heard a lot today, during the pandemic, our interactions with farmers and our partners were very much restricted. And so we needed to find new ways to meet these goals. So we thought podcast, and this is something that had been kind of tossed around for a while. So it was just kind of like this, if we had been talking about it, this was the time to do it. So the benefits, your audience can access and engage with this content on their own time, which is a big win. We were also starting to get feedback from virtual courses, as 2020 went on, that this kind of format was a nice break from Zoom and reading, so there's potential there to use it as an educational tool. So to develop it, we're kind of just starting completely from scratch, but we reviewed kind of existing podcasts that had similar topics and content, or even just ones that we liked the format of. We met with other developers to kind of talk about challenges and things that went well for them. And we collected feedback from our regional advisors and community members on what they wanted to hear and how they wanted to hear it. So we launched in September. We're aiming for 15-minute episodes. And what we kind of want to do to what we thought would stand apart would be to incorporate farmer told stories into this. And I know it was coming up in the chat earlier, if you're watching that through some of the ATV presentations, how do we bring that side of this thing to the health and safety side? So, we try to get farmers and ag workers to tell us about a time that they encountered a hazard. Did they have an injury that changed the way they work? Are there things they do on their farm to keep people safe? And can we give them an opportunity to share that side of things? And then also, have a platform to provide evidence-based recommendations and resources for implementation of those recommendations. So it really also becomes an opportunity to highlight, the research the center does, but also outreach programs, not just through us, but from our partners throughout the region. And I will say again, ATVs, the posters got the pie chart of what people said they wanted to hear most about, and ATVs topped the list. And so that's where we started. And we were lucky enough to have experts that we know. Dr. Jennissen came on to do some work with us, and then Jenna and Carolyn from the Ag Health and Safety Alliance started with that. So that's how we started out. I'll also say thank you to Jenna too, because they had students who had a lot of ATV stories. So we were able to incorporate that into those episodes. So evaluation is ongoing. This is really the tricky part, right? We can track metrics on our host platform, things like downloads and listeners and subscribers, locations. There's a map on the poster so we can see where people are listening. It's hard to really check engagement with that. So we're also looking at things like reviews and comments and even just willingness to share stories. So it's a learning as we go, a lot of opportunity to kind of grow this. Like I said, it just started, so it's a little flexible and we can make some changes based on the feedback we get. But all in there, we just wanted to share how we started doing that. I will say, we're not doing a breakout room today because of the time constraints, but hopefully tomorrow. But if anyone's interested in sharing stories, or if anyone's working on projects that they want us to highlight, we please get in touch with me. We'd love to be able to communicate those things.
Great, thank you so much. And Kate, I know you are actually going to present again on the U.S. Agricultural Safety and Health Center's YouTube channel, examining viewership of agricultural health and safety videos.
Yes, let me switch gears here.
And for those of you that have not listened to the podcast, can't recommend them enough. I listen online, but I do think you can find them in wherever you go for podcasts.
Yeah, that's actually, we're in Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and Spotify, and you should be able to find it in your directories. And if you're having trouble finding it somewhere, let me know and I'll make sure we get listed on it. Okay, do you now see my other poster? Okay.
Yep.
So this is a collaboration. So the 11 NIOSH ag centers in the United States, we collaborate on a shared YouTube channel to provide health and safety information to the ag workforce. And so since it started in October 2013 through December 2020 is the time period we were looking at, there's been 152 videos published in 3 kind of main categories: health, safety, and then livestock handling. So a group of us from just a few of these centers, myself from Great Plains, and then Cheryl Bessler, our lead author from CS Cash, along with Devin from UMash, and then Athena also from CS Cash. We started looking at trends in the channel usage over time to see how it was doing and see what kind of things we could report back to other centers in terms of evaluation. And because videos are being added over time, you can't just look at some of those standard metrics, like, the number of views is growing, but that's what happens, over 7 years as you're adding videos. So Cheryl came up with this idea of how to do a time series analysis to look at the growth in channel viewership. So what type of videos are impacting views, subscribers, watch hours, watch time, things like that. And so generally what we found was that growth in the channel viewership was explained by past month viewership, which makes sense, right? This is how YouTube works. The more views, likes, and comments you get, the more visible your videos are. But I think what the kind of interesting, surprising point that we found was that safety videos were the most frequently watched, but it was the health and the livestock videos that were the only significant predictors of viewership growth in this model. So there's over 340,000 views, 56% of them were safety videos. But in the time series, what we're seeing is that even though people are watching all these safety videos 1 month, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily getting more views the following month or increases in subscribers or things like that. But then with the health and livestock videos, even with a lower number of views, any views in the past month were leading to increases in the next month in views and watch hours and subscribers. So if we dig into the analytics that are available on YouTube a little bit, we can kind of get some ideas for what's happening. And so what we're seeing is that there's viewership spikes that kind of occur. And we can trace some of these back to outreach events and also media content and how things are shared. And so you'd see these big spikes kind of like on these graphs, but then they're not sustainable. The other thing is we can look at the traffic source data and we start seeing the health videos are most likely accessed from external websites, including .edu sites. So that was suggesting to us that people are using these as training videos. And then the livestock videos were accessed most often through YouTube searches. So those are viewers that are specifically looking for content and typing in something and finding these videos. And then the safety videos were far and away mostly accessed as suggested videos, which means a viewer who's watching something YouTube deems similar would then have one of our videos just start playing next or show up in their queues. So again, with ATVs, it could be if someone's watching a YouTube video on an ATV course, just watching people ride, we might get one of our safety videos kind of like slid into their queue. So I think that's really interesting because we're likely getting more views and reaching a larger audience, but then those viewers are probably also more likely to stop watching or maybe ignore our content, certainly maybe not subscribing to the channel. And that's not to say that they're not important. All these videos are important. But I think what we were taking out of this is really trying to understand how we're reaching our viewers and what people are using these videos for. That's something that we should really try and understand and then use that to figure out how to grow the channel and how to kind of target our content and use it as a strategy for how we reach our audience. And we actually have a paper on this that was just published. So there's a link to that if anyone's looking for more information. I know I went fast, but thank you.
Thank you so much to Kate and your co-authors. That's a really interesting analysis and certainly something, the YouTube channel has been active for several years. And so it's interesting to see how viewership has changed and what videos tend to bring people to the YouTube channel. So thank you so much for that. Next, we will hear from Ralph Altmaier. He will talk about the iCash Youth Grant recipients from 1998 to 2021.
Oh, the wrong screen though. Huh. I can only share the wrong screen. Well, there we go. It refuses to share on the.
We saw it the first time, Ralph. When you shared it the first time, we could see it well.
Oh, oh, I couldn't. Okay. Can you see it?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, not sure what's going on.
You had it working the first time.
Well, rat.
Now we got it.
Looks good.
Okay. But, well, this turns out is not really a research poster, as you can see. It's more of an informative and even recruiting. iCash does these youth grants every year, and we have now for almost 25 years. We try to fund 10 a year. In 2020, we couldn't do that. There weren't that many people doing events, particularly in person. But this year we had 12 we funded because there were so many good applications. And its idea is recruiting youth into safety programs. We try to make these youth, hopefully youth designed and youth executed. And we work a lot with 4-H clubs and FFA, and some Farm Bureau people get involved with these. So we've done almost 200 of these grants and distributed nearly $150,000 by now, and pretty well spread around the state. Some hot spots where people do them repeatedly. A lot of those are farm safety days. We also each year declare one outstanding youth grant, and this year it was the Carroll Champs 4-H who did some fair safety stuff. And they have a really cute video that we posted a link to on our MRASH site on the Wednesday tab. So you get a chance, you can watch it. They talk about how to safely approach a show cattle at a fair, and that's an issue because you get these cattle into a fairground and it's a very foreign environment. and lots of strangers and lots of noise, and safety is pretty important there. It's nice to see a club recognizing that. We also have, of course, next year will become available here in January. So we're looking for more people. We'd like to fill in our map, get some of those gray squares turned blue so we can get more coverage around the state. So feel free to share our website, our application when it's active. And I got to say that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Ralph. I know a couple people who've benefited, excuse me, from the youth grants, and it's really neat to see what types of projects people are working on. So I have a question. I see, there was like 2 dark squares on the map. One is obviously Johnson County, where the University of Iowa is. So that's would maybe explain why so many people apply from Johnson County. But do you have any idea why what's happening?
Well, it turns out that's
in Iowa?
Not Johnson County. That is Washington County, just south of here. They have a pretty active club. They developed this thing called Take a Break, Stay Safe, Take a Break, where they would collect stuff from local businesses, and then the 4-H people would go out in the fall during harvest and stock combine and give farmers these bags of stuff and tell them you need to take a break once in a while to help keep you safe. And we thought that was such a wonderful program. We advertised that statewide, and they've continued to do it, and we continue to fund them. We really love that. Now, the one up northern Iowa, I'm not really sure what's going on up there. I think that's Farm Safety Days. They've just been going on for a lot of years.
Excellent. Thank you.